I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast, talking about how we take a proactive approach with our fertility. And many times when we're on the fertility journey, if we're over 35, we can wait 6 months for testing, or under 35, we need to wait a year. How do we get information earlier? Why do we need to wait? And how do we empower ourselves? The conversation around fertility and women's health is changing. So I wanted to talk about some trends with this, what to look for, and how we can start to demand things change as far as women's health and reproductive health and what you can do right now. I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 4 spots available per month to work with us. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. And this call is for you if you meet at least one of these criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This calls for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering working with us, go to Fab Fertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. That's Fab Fertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. One theme that keeps coming up with the couples in our Fab Fertile Couples Coaching Program is sleep. Whether it's insomnia, having a hard time falling asleep, waking up at night, or feeling tired when we wake up, sleep is critical for fertility and hormones. And that's why I'm so excited to have Blue Blocks as our podcast sponsor. So we're exposed to blue and green light from our phones, our tablets, our computers, indoor lights, and more. And this exposure impacts our melatonin production. And melatonin is essential for both female and male fertility. It helps determine the frequency and duration of our cycle and impacts sperm. There's lots of blue light blocking glasses on the market, but the ones from Blue Blocks, they've actually compared other popular brands, and Blue Blocks block 100% of blue and green light, while other brands fall short. So I have their sleep glasses. They have red lenses, and the ones I have are a little translucent frame, and they're so stylish and really cool. And so they eliminate 100% of the blue and green light in the 400 nanometer to 550 nanometer range. So this is the exact range that has been shown in clinical studies to disrupt melatonin and negatively impact your sleep. So all you do is wear your sleep glasses after sunset until it's time for bed, and you'll notice improved sleep after just one use. And it's also cool to use when you're flying for managing jet lag. So I got to say, I was a little skeptical about the noticing improvement after one use, but literally I use these glasses and my sleep is actually already pretty good. I used them for one day, and I have to say, after one day, I had the best sleep of my life. I just felt so rested. So these glasses, they ship free and they're tracked for all orders anywhere in the world. And also they have all their frames come in prescription, non-prescription, and reading glasses. Plus you can send in your frames and they'll add the blue light blocking and green light blocking lenses to your frame. So this is an easy hack that you can add to your fertility toolkit. All you do is go to BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com. Use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast at checkout and receive a 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast to receive your 15% discount. Hey there. Thanks so much for listening to the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. And I've got a favor to ask you. If you are enjoying learning about the functional approach to fertility, consider going to iTunes and rating and reviewing the podcast. This is how it helps the show reach more people that are struggling with infertility, knowing that there's another approach that really can get to the bottom of why it's not working in the first place. So all you need to do is, if you're on the app or the desktop, just go in and consider leaving a 5-star rating and leave a review. And there is step-by-step instructions in the show notes showing you exactly how to do that. So if you can just take a few minutes, just take the few minutes right now. You can pause this recording, come back, leave the review. It would really mean the world to me and help others that are on the fertility journey as well. Take care. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently, restored. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under.
Many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's often merely an assumption that's not based on actual evidence. The reason being that there is no direct test of egg quality. You can't test egg quality.
It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or he has a zinc deficiency.
Like, there can be a root cause to these symptoms that are, quote unquote, period problems, that the doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
And some part of you knows that if you can reframe your journey from not want to struggle, or if it is struggle, learn how to embrace the struggle. Learn how to embrace it.
Most conditions in the child occur during the 9 months of development. It's the genetic switches are turned on or turned off, and they're pre-programmed. So you are in such a powerful, amazing position to do amazing things for your kids.
Why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey there, I'm Sarah Clark, founder of Fab Fertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step for anyone struggling with infertility, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Afton Vechery to the podcast. We're digging into how to take a proactive approach to your fertility early in the journey. Afton Vechery is on a mission to integrate the growing and buzzy fertility sector more broadly into women's culture and mainstream wellness. Her company, Modern Fertility, offers at-home hormone tests, the same one given at fertility clinics, but for a fraction of the price. It's designed to get women to think more proactively and earlier about their reproductive health. The company recently expanded into ovulation and pregnancy tests and launched an app that helps read and track test results. The San Francisco startup, which Vechery co-founded in 2017, has raised $22 million from the likes of Mavron, Union Square Ventures, and Kirsten Green's Forerunner Ventures, which tellingly has also backed hot consumer companies like the Dollar Shave Club and Warby Parker. Afton herself was featured on Forbes 30 Under 30 and just recently Fortune 40 Under 40 list as well. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm so thankful that you're here. Make sure you hit subscribe, and if you know someone else who is on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Hey, Afton, excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So if you could share your journey and really how you came to do this work.
Oh gosh, that's a great place to start. So, my whole introduction to the fertility and infertility space was actually back in my first job out of school. I was working at a healthcare private equity firm in New York, or I was living in New York and doing that fun reverse commute to Greenwich, Connecticut. And my job at the time was to find interesting areas of healthcare that were growing, had some consolidation potential. And I ended up spending a lot of time in women's health because of my personal interest. And within women's health, I kind of stumbled on infertility and fertility that I just, I didn't know that was a thing at the time. And I ended up leading the diligence for a roll-up. So basically investing in a network of IVF clinics and labs all across the US. And so it was through that process I learned the business of infertility. I learned the science of infertility, but it was really that emotional aspect that stuck with me. I was in waiting rooms and I talked to women who, had never told me that fertility declined with age, or told me that no one had ever told them that fertility declined with age, or that, IVF wouldn't work for every single person. And so, fast forward from there, I ended up leaving finance, working at a variety of personalized medicine and women's healthcare companies. And I realized that I was waiting until later in life to start my own family. And so I remembered those baseline tests that I had learned about back in finance. And I asked my OBGYN if I could have them done. And my OBGYN said, no, you're not actively trying and failing to conceive. So I'm not going to give you that script. So I had to go into an infertility clinic, requested those tests, a story for another time, but I have a very irregular cycle and was diagnosed with PCOS as a part of getting those tests done. But it took me a while to pinpoint day 3 of my menstrual cycle to get those tests done. But when I finally got those results back, I just had such a powerful conversation with myself, my partner, my physician about my own timeline. And I think, the aha moment for me in starting Modern Fertility was really talking about this experience to friends of friends, and eventually hundreds of women who, all said, I want more information to help me plan, to help me think through my timeline. And so the kicker of, me getting these tests done were I got a bill back in the mail for $1,500. And so really, starting Modern Fertility, our first product took those standard tests that you would do in an infertility clinic if you were having trouble getting pregnant out of the clinic. And we made them accessible to women earlier in life at a fraction of the cost. Our price point is $159 and it's covered by HSA and FSA in this really easy to access format. So we have a finger prick test like diabetics use that you can do from home.
Nice. Yeah. It kind of goes into my next question about like the trends. I know in well and good, in 2019, the trend for the year was, or one of the trends for the year was women's hormones and fertility, really talking about that conversation that's changing around women's reproductive health. And we talked about, and as you say, when you wanted to get those tests done by your OBGYN and they're like, no, you got to wait. And like, why do we need to wait when we know our bodies best and we're kind of put on this timeline that we need to wait until, if you're under 35, it's a year, or over 35, it's 6 months. Why do we need to wait for that when we can access this data now? So what's your take on the conversation, how that's changing?
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of crazy that the way that our current system works today is that there are going to be, or it depends on the stat you use, but let's say that, 1 in 6 couples have trouble getting pregnant. It is crazy today that all 6 couples have to try and fail for, between 6 months and a year before they can get any more information. And when you really study those journeys and you realize, at the beginning, if someone knew that they, were part of the 1 in 10 women that had PCOS and had irregular ovulation or were anovulatory, that they could have had a different route. And yes, fertility today is not a crystal ball, but there is more information that is available to help women understand their own bodies and think through their futures. And yeah, I mean, that is at the crux of why we started Modern Fertility and what we're focused on today is to make that information more accessible to women earlier so that they can have more information to own the decisions that are impacting their bodies and futures, whatever those decisions might be.
Yeah. And it's interesting, even with us, I have a 19-year-old daughter and she's, very open about her period. I know when I had my period, I was like, oh my goodness, this is embarrassing. I don't want to talk about it. It was like, oh, it came every month. And now, you've got people on Instagram showing, I'm bleeding and like being able to normalize these conversations. Also, I remember, in grade 7 sex ed class and how watching that vision of birth with blood, and it was like horrific. And I'm like, we're all like, no, we don't want to do any of that. And so a lot of things that are going on in the education system that's a little bit backwards. And I think, there's a changing conversation happening right now that it's normalizing being able to talk about what women do every month, how to have a period.
I think that there is a massive cultural shift happening across all of women's health and just the solutions that we're demanding and just how we are having the conversation with ourselves and with each other. And I think, as women, we owe it to ourselves and to each other to make these topics normal, to make having your period, to make fertility just a part of your overall health. At Modern Fertility, we talk about, taking fertility and bringing it into mainstream wellness. And, we live in a world where, you can look on a clean beauty product and you can see every single ingredient and where it came from and the impacts that it has on your body. Yet fertility is just this total black box and it's wait and see. And that's not okay. And I think when you look at infertility specifically, you see, Chrissy Teigen tweeting about her experience and sharing it broadly. You see Michelle Obama, not in her presidency, but in her book afterwards, talking about her infertility journey. And I think that we're in the midst of this cultural transition where we are okay sharing this information, where we're seeing more folks around us. And, for every person that I've talked to that has struggled in some way, the conversation we have is just, I wish I would have had these types of tests earlier. And like, how can I help you? How can I tell other women in my life that this exists and that you can start to have just a little bit more information earlier? And I think that is the conversation, the destigmatization, the shift that we're all about.
Absolutely. And as we were talking about, this was the case for me when I was diagnosed for premature ovarian failure or insufficiency at the age of 28 and went on to have both my kids with donor eggs, and years later discovered food sensitivities and gut infections and chronic stress. But when I had those irregular periods in my early 20s, the first thing that was recommended to me was the birth control pill. So I was on that for about 8 years and then came off, and that's when I got the diagnosis. And then even after that, after I had my children, again, was put on birth control. So been on it for a lot of time, which then can, impact your health as well. But yeah, what's your take with women that are having issues with their period? kids in their teens, and then they're placed on the pill, and I didn't know what was going on with my reproductive health and coming off the pill and what it did to me.
Yeah, well, the pill is masking all of that. I think taking a step back, I think that the control that birth control gives women, I think is amazing and to be celebrated. But I think when we give anyone medication, we need to be educating them on the side effects. And side effects, I think, kind of come in two areas. It could be side effects of the medication in particular. With birth control, you can Google and easily find out what that is. But what we don't really talk about is, what birth control can mask in your body. And yeah, irregular periods are not normal. I think they are common, but it means that something else is going on. It is okay to treat that underlying condition with birth control, but we're doing a disservice to women by not helping them understand what those things are and how it might impact their future fertility. I've talked to physicians who have said, what we should be doing is for any woman that goes on birth control, we should be sending it to them at home with a modern fertility hormone test so that when they are going on birth control, they can also check in, understand their fertility hormone levels, and just use that as a starting point. And, I think that is the shift that I would love to see, is having fertility hormone testing being a part of the standard of care and just thinking about all of this holistically. And I think that shift and just understanding reproductive health at a different level than we do today can lead to people with ovaries becoming better advocates for themselves and just thinking through some of those ASIN implications. I would say that we have done and actually presented the American Society for Reproductive Medicine this year on the impacts of birth control on anti-Mullerian hormone. AMH is one of the leading indicators of premature ovarian failure, diminished ovarian reserve, even PCOS. It can be used to help diagnose in some aspects if it's on the higher end of the range. And you still can get an indication while on birth control. And so it can just slightly decrease your levels dependent on the type of birth control you're on. But we kind of counsel and provide guidance around that. So I think my view and recommendation, although probably biased, is just to have every person between the ages of 21 and 45 checking in on their fertility hormones proactively. I think modern fertility just provides an easy way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowledge is power. And really, most people that we speak to that have been on birth control, they didn't go on for prevention. They went on because they had irregular cycles or heavy cycles or cramping or, it was something going on with their period. And so the first line of defense is going on the birth control pill and they come off. And then now, not to say that everyone goes on the pill and they're dealing with infertility, when they come off of it, but people that we're speaking to, and then it's people being on for like 5, 10, 15 years. And then there's, post birth control pill syndrome, which predisposes you to food sensitivities, gut infections, and then that nutrient imbalance. The testing there in the beginning is crucial. And most people that we work with, they've had at least one failed IVF or they've been trying for over 2 years. And we typically will deal with complex cases like POI, POF, low AMH, DOR, diminished ovarian reserve. But it is to have people know before you get to that there's things we can do. If I had known in my early 20s that, it wasn't a great idea that my cycle came twice a year. Like I thought it was. I'm like, I don't have to deal with the hassle. That was what I was thinking in my early 20s. But that was a sign. That's a barometer of your health. And something was off. And I'm like clueless, like completely clueless.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was crazy. I always thought that my irregular periods were just because I'm type A and very stressed most of the time. And I was like, oh, like that must be it. And I never had a physician bring up PCOS. And then when I finally got diagnosed with PCOS as a part of getting my fertility hormones tested, even then we didn't go through in detail, how many cycles and I'm not on hormonal birth control, how many cycles I was getting a year, and talk about the risk factors of, if you are only getting a few menstrual cycles a year, it actually puts you at high risk for endometrial cancer because you have all of this unbound estrogen in your ovaries that places you at a higher risk. And so it's really important to understand how birth control can help those risk factors, but you need to have that information, understand all of the other impacts, and be able to understand what that birth control is masking, what that birth control is helping, and then use that in the context of your broader family planning timeline.
Absolutely. And you just published a study I saw on your Instagram there talking about the modern state of fertility. If you can share your findings kind of around career and finances, what have you discovered there in your study?
So what was really interesting is we were just, doing a partnership and research with financial planning company SoFi. And we surveyed thousands of women, people with ovaries all across the US. And we're just asking them about how fertility and finances and timelines all tied together because we had a hypothesis that they were linked. And so that research in itself is fascinating. But where we were launching it amidst the time that COVID happened and the mandatory shutdowns occurred at the beginning of the year, year in kind of the February, March timeframe. And so we added on a lot of questions about how COVID specifically was impacting family planning timelines. And what was just very interesting from that survey is that instead of the baby boom of people being at home and anticipating that kind of rise in childbirths in the year of 2020 and 2021, what we saw from our data was that a large percentage of families were actually delaying their family planning decisions based on COVID. One of the leading reasons for that being finances, followed by kind of trust in the healthcare system and what their prenatal care would look like. And then a few other factors like I want more travel, more things to do before I start having kids. And we actually just did another survey with thousands of women all across the US asking them, okay, now at the end of the year, months into COVID, is that still the case? And we found for the most part, those same delays held true. We found about 30% of women were delaying their family planning goals. And COVID was also causing some folks to accelerate, but an equal number to actually say like, hey, I'm questioning my decision to have kids altogether. And so I think that, as you mentioned with your daughter, just generationally, we are thinking about kids in the family planning process so differently than previous generations. And the most powerful thing that we can have to help us inform these decisions is information. And that's where we just try to sit as a company.
I was reading there that you were very passionate about premature ovarian insufficiency. I just wanted to have you elaborate on that for us.
I just couldn't believe, when starting modern fertility and talking to so many clinicians, I could not believe that I had never heard of POI or POF or DOR, or it just feels like an acronym game. But this idea that, 1 in 100 women have premature ovarian insufficiency. And I had just never heard about it before. And when you compare that statistic to the number of women that have BRCA, which is a much lower prevalence, and the fact that we have so much education and information about BRCA, I was so frustrated that we didn't have a medical system that could screen for and help women just understand where their bodies were. And when you look at the power of understanding that information, when you look at the impact of POI or POF on other parts of your health, I became so frustrated that we didn't have more screening tools and systems in place to provide that early diagnosis. And then when I heard stories of women that, were experiencing irregular periods or were experiencing premenopausal symptoms and whose doctors just didn't even think to screen for this, it made me more frustrated on just the true gap that we have in women's health today. And I think it has been so powerful for me to see people with ovaries taking the modern fertility hormone test, finding a red flag, and then having that follow-up conversation with their doctor and having the data to propel that conversation. I think those are some of the most touching stories. And so I think it's an area that I'm just incredibly passionate about. And I think that we should just have so many more resources available to detect and provide next steps to people that are at risk of this condition.
Many times, basically, when you get your diagnosis of POI or POF, is, you're saying it's been told, sorry, it's donor eggs for you. Nothing else will work. And, I didn't even get a second opinion and I had all these underlying issues. So the knowledge is power to be able to get that early on to see if you are at a predisposition to this. And then knowing there's things you can do from a functional standpoint to actually, it doesn't need to be your destiny that it's donor eggs. We've helped lots of people that get pregnant naturally, or if they do go to IVF, they can get pregnant with their own eggs. So it is to be able to get that information in earlier. If I had have got that earlier, obviously there's no regrets. I do this work now. I had to really struggle through this, and then my health took a nosedive after I had my kids, and now helping, couples similar to me in those, it usually hits like the POI typically between, 28 to usually in the early 30s is kind of what we're seeing. Obviously, it could be later 30s too, but it's a devastating diagnosis, mind, body, spirit, and really knowing where to go forward.
No, well, I think the work that you're doing is just so important, and just I think amazing that you took a personal experience and able to translate that into a life and work that continues to help others. So I think that that's amazing to just see you move the needle there. Very, very cool.
And so how do we take a proactive approach with our reproductive health? Sometimes when we're in the conversation with the person in the white coat, with our OBGYN, our reproductive endocrinologist, we might feel, for me, I didn't get a second opinion. I thought, okay, here we go. That's what I have to do. So how do we then take that proactive role early on? What do we need to do?
Yeah. So I think really understanding your reproductive health, considering your reproductive health a part of your core health, and just investing and becoming that advocate for yourself, I think is just essential when we live in a world where our OBGYN OBGYNs or primary care physicians, sometimes, but not always, are fertility specialists. And the way that the fertility system works today is that there are only, 2,000 reproductive endocrinologists and there's only 500 clinics. And so getting that information, up front, there's just a massive fertility education gap. And so, Modern Fertility, we really started as a fertility education company. We wanted to enable folks to just have this information earlier. And then when we realized that you could have that, one layer beyond information with personalized hormone tests that help you put that information into context, that was really the motivation behind launching our first product. But I think that in terms of going into those visits specifically, within the Modern Fertility experience, we have a doctor discussion guide, which really just helps you, go in, jot down those questions ahead of time, and really just based on your goals, based on where you are in the process, make that list, that note to yourself of the answers that you want to come out with. But I think, for us, it's really investing in that baseline of information, that baseline of hormone levels, and going from there, I think, is the best advice that I could give anyone.
And so just talk about some of the testing that you have and what your company offers there. What kind of tests are they looking at?
Yeah. So within the Modern Fertility hormone test, we test AMH, FSH, estradiol, luteinizing hormone, thyroid, free thyroxine, and prolactin. And we will customize that panel based on the type of birth control, if any, someone's taking, since birth control blocks some of those hormones from being tested. We also, earlier this year, launched a way to test for other fertility hormones. We launched ovulation testing and pregnancy testing. So for ovulation testing, we brought to market a semi-quantitative ovulation test, which is super cool, and an early detection pregnancy test. And for everyone, a free corresponding app that goes along with both of those products. I think, when we started Modern Fertility, we also launched a community, and it has just been so powerful to just have this one-on-one communication through social media, through our online Slack community, through email with our customers or people that just see us and want to communicate. And we just kept getting questions and comments about ovulation and pregnancy testing. And around ovulation testing, we just kept hearing, ovulation tests don't work for me. And for some reason, they don't work. And we took a step back and just kind of thought that was a little bit crazy, and dug in a bit and realized that for the majority of ovulation tests, they're based on a threshold, which basically means that, you pee on the stick or pee in a cup and dip the stick in, and they are above 25 MIUs, you get a smiley face. And if it's below, you get a sad face. But for a lot of women, you never hit that threshold, or you're above that threshold a lot. And so we brought to market a semi-quantitative ovulation test, which actually reads the amount of LH that you have in your urine. You can scan that in our app and track your LH each day. And then we predict your fertile window within that app. We help you understand, if you are actively trying to conceive, when to test for pregnancy as well, and the success rates, clinical confidence that a pregnancy test has based on the day that you're testing, and have that kind of all tied in a cohesive experience. And then it was really important to us that we weren't putting the pink tax on these products. And so you can get 20 ovulation tests and the free app for $16, $15 if you subscribe. And pregnancy tests are priced as well at just $14 for a pack of 4. And so just really coming to market with accessible solutions to just make this process a little bit easier.
Yeah. Is there anything else out there with being able to track the LH? Is that something, innovation and stuff that you've developed with the app?
Yeah. So this measuring LH from a semi-quantitative test is something that has been done before, but we found a gap in the market in terms of really being able to do that in a way where we really invested in the algorithm, where we really invested in this holistic experience of tying ovulation, pregnancy, and lots more to come in that digital experience. We really want to be, the go-to place that allows all of that information to come together. And then we also felt that there was a gap with a lot of the tests on the market, this entire category. It was just lots of babies, lots of triggering messaging, lots of lingo. And we really tried to take a step back from all of that. For example, I test ovulation today. I'm not actively trying to conceive, but I love understanding just where I am in my irregular cycle. We talked to so many women that, were triggered by the babies that they saw in a lot of these boxes. And so we took that and combined it with just this real talk. So there's education inside every box. You get access to free education around what these tests are, how they work, free access to our community to ask me anything with physicians. And so it's really, by grabbing these physical and digital products off the shelves, you get access to so much more beyond that. And yeah, we just didn't see anybody offering this holistic set of essentials to just help women have better outcomes.
What are some resources you'd like to recommend? Anything you're obsessed with right now? A book, a website, an app, a documentary, anything that you are liking?
I am probably too nerdy right now. I love just reading fertility, sterility, paying attention to the ASRM listservs and just understanding what's happening. I am still behind on listening to the video recorded seminars from the American Society for Reproductive Medicine digital conference earlier this year. So that's probably not the most exciting for anyone here. But, the honest answer is whenever I have a question about something, I check the Modern Fertility blog first because we do physician reviewed articles on a variety of topics. And then I figure that if I'm asking this question, there's probably a lot of other people out there asking it. And so then what we do is a deep dive and we look at the latest literature. We look and talk to physicians across the US and we write kind of this real talk blog post that really breaks down the science. And so honestly, I know it's probably biased, but the Modern Fertility blog is my favorite resource for that. And it's not just my ideas. It's ideas coming in from, podcasts like this. It's from our community members. It's from people that ping us on social media. And our hope is to really just have a comprehensive resource.
Great. And is there a success story you'd like to share with us?
I'll share one that comes to mind around premature ovarian insufficiency. We had someone take the modern fertility hormone test and find out she had undetectable levels of AMH. And we know that there is a partially genetic component to that condition. And so she had little sisters. And so she was able to share this experience with them. And they were much younger and get them all tested with the modern fertility hormone test and has just become this incredible advocate for women finding this information out earlier. And so in that same world where she was kind of later on in her journey, finding this information out in a very expected way, she was able to share this information with other women in her life to help them have more tools to navigate. And I just thought that story was so beautiful and that was her immediate reaction was, how do I tell this to the women in my life? Before thinking about herself, she was thinking about her little sisters. And I think to be in a space and working in a company where you just every single day get to see women lifting up other women, it's really beautiful. And so I think, you can be really frustrated about the gaps that exist in care, but learning more about the work that you do, hearing these stories, it's really just a beautiful space to be able to contribute to and move forward.
And so where can the listeners find you there? When you've got Instagram and your blog, where can they find you?
Yeah, we're all over. So if you head to modernfertility.com, we have everything there. If you have more questions, you can send us an email of just hi@modernfertility.com. I'm Afton Vechery on Instagram. We'd love to chat, hear your thoughts, feedback. We're trying to meet you where you are. We launched our pregnancy tests and ovulation tests in 1,500 Walmart stores all across the country. So if you need those tests tomorrow, you can swing by your local Walmart and grab those tests there.
Excellent. Yeah, I just saw that on your Instagram. Congratulations. It's exciting.
Thanks.
And any final thoughts that you have for us?
I think we've talked about so much. Thank you for creating the space for these types of conversations and letting me nerd out a bit on all of this. This was a blast.
No, it was awesome. Thanks so much for all the work that you're doing in the community and really bringing this conversation forward and really focusing on women's health. Knowledge is power. And so thanks for all the work you're doing.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 4 spots available per month to work with us. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. And this call is for you if you meet at least one of these criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This calls for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. That's FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. Melatonin is important for female fertility. It helps regulate hormones and maintain the body's circadian rhythms. Plus, it helps determine the frequency and duration of the menstrual cycle. Plus, it impacts sperm count and motility. Blue and green light negatively impact our melatonin production. That's why we recommend Blue Blocks, blue and green light sleep glasses to all our one-to-one clients. Simply go to Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX.com and use the coupon code GET Pregnant Podcast at checkout to receive your 15% discount. That's BlueBlox, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.